How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys Alex and Ryan. Today we're discussing some newfound information that's kind of unraveling as we speak regarding, the shortstop position battle. Anthony Volpe, Oswald Peraza. Manager Aaron Boone had some interesting words to say about Oswald Peraza that I kind of want to run by you guys and get your take on. And Ryan, I want to get your take on it as well, because this is the first time we've seen Boone really voice any concern or really be critical of a young prospect, right? The amount of times that he's defended IKF, defended Aaron Hicks, defended guys that otherwise are not like that great of baseball players, and then to come out and say something kind of negative on Oswald Peraza may indicate that he really wants Volpe to be promoted. It may indicate he's trying to push Peraza to play better or perform better or take things more seriously. I don't necessarily know what's going on there, but it was a really interesting kind of quote that definitely suggested to me that Boone is feeling some type of way about something, and I kind of feel like he wants Volpe to be the guy. A lot of people want Volpe to be the guy, especially with all of the high-level players. DJ LeMay, who's come out and said publicly he thinks Volpe's ready to be promoted. Aaron Judge has publicly said he's ready. A lot of other people in the front office have said to Brendan Cuddy of The Athletic, under, anonymous kind of pseudonyms, like that they want Volpe to be starting on opening day. And I don't really know, where we go from here, because just a couple of days ago, Peraza was the starting shortstop, and now we're kind of sitting here like, what's going to happen? What happens to Gleyber Torres in this entire equation? Because it seems like Torres isn't even included in this conversation anymore. Nestor Cortez came out and said something very specific about, Peraza and Volpe in a position battle with one another. But I honestly didn't even think about them being against each other. I thought they were kind of in the same boat as, Volpe would take over second base and Peraza would be at shortstop. And now we're starting to kind of get this sense from the front office and the players that they're competing for the starting shortstop job. So it's kind of a really interesting thing that's unfolding before our eyes, Ryan. But, how are you perceiving this? Because the narrative is changing quite fast, and I don't necessarily know, what everyone's thinking, because everyone's saying something different.
So, it's definitely a curious situation where, I feel like Aaron Boone very much wants Anthony Volpe to be a shortstop. I feel like the Anthony Volpe discourse, the Anthony Volpe decision comes down to, it's, I think, Aaron Boone and the coaching staff versus the front office on this decision, right? And, everyone's going to say, or not everyone, but some initial thoughts may be, how are the manager and front office not in lockstep? Well, I do think having healthy disagreements like this is good for an organization. I feel like if everyone just felt the same way about players, you wouldn't really end up making very good decisions, because everyone would just do the exact same thing. So I think it is good that they're having the conversation, that they have two different perspectives. Volpe is someone that, the coaching staff and Boone get to see on a day-to-day basis, see how they interact with the clubhouse, see how they interact with the locker room, with the veterans, with leaders on the team. I think that plays a factor into whether they think he's major league ready or not. Willie Randolph had really interesting quotes early in spring training, comparing his intangibles to the likes of Don Mattingly and Derek Jeter, and while people may think that's an insane, expectations to place on him, he wasn't referring to on-the-field production. He was just speaking from, that it factor. We know that Aaron Boone's a guy who loves intangibles. He's a guy who, does believe that there's off-the-field value that a player can provide to a locker room and to a clubhouse. If you're Brian Cashman, if you're, members of the front office, you're, in the scouting team, or you are, someone in charge of making roster decisions, how are you going to really justify a decision in which you're sending down Oswald Peraza and bringing up Anthony Volpe, right? Peraza has more major league success. He has more AAA success. He's the more advanced prospect right now, but it's a clash of ideals, right? Because, at the end of the day, I can understand Aaron Boone's frustration because, the Yankees have had this slower approach with prospects, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, not rushing guys. You can end up rushing guys during development. But on the flip side of that means that you're missing out on years where these guys could provide to this major league ball club. You know what I mean? And there is a good argument to be made that the Yankees are way too slow to trust their prospects. They're way too slow to start Oswald Peraza. They're way too slow to give Cabrera some run in the outfield, the infield, whatever it may be. If the Yankees continue to have that mindset, maybe that's something they feel is costing them. Maybe Boone looks at the way that the Astros beat them with Jeremy Pena just getting the job, just straight up getting it out of camp and excelling. He maybe feels that that's what Volpe is destined to do. That Volpe is destined to go out there and be the catalyst for this team to go out and win a World Series. People forget, that Astros core from 2018 to 2021, they were consistently getting to the World Series, the ALCS, and they were just falling short. They were just falling short to competition that people perceived before the season as better than them. And Pena became the catalyst to kind of push them over the edge. It looked like, maybe the Phillies would be another team on a long list of NL East teams to beat the Astros in the World Series, and he stepped up to the plate, and they turned the series around. So I think from Aaron Boone's perspective, it's something he wants there to be. He wants this team to have a new identity. But from the perspective of Brian Cashman in the front office, you don't want to make a mistake here, because Anthony Volpe being a bust is getting people fired. Like, let's be real here. I wouldn't be able to defend Brian Cashman if he called up Volpe on opening day and Volpe was a bust. Like, that would get you fired. So it's a really weird clash of ideals. There's no right or wrong argument, in my opinion. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. And look, the service time argument is based in something that won't affect us for 5 years, right? If Volpe ends up being a top 3 rookie of the year candidate and he ends up accumulating extra service time year because of that, which is in the new CBA, you're talking about something that's 5 years from now, guys. Like, we can win 2 World Series in the next 5 years. We can do a lot of great things in that time period, and holding Volpe back because of some logistical thing that may or may not even happen, it feels like malpractice. It feels kind of disrespectful. And look, they're going to have to pay the guy anyway. Look what, Fernando Tatis gets a huge deal before his service time even gets, is expired. So you could do the same thing with Volpe, knowing that he's mature, he's disciplined, he is, primed to be a really great MLB player. And right now, I feel like it's in the best interest of the team for him to be starting on opening day. It just depends on where. And this quote by Peraza, on Peraza rather, is really interesting, Ryan. I don't know exactly what the point of it was from Boone, but I'll read it to you and you give me your take. He said, for the most part, he's been all right. Yesterday, he didn't have great at-bats, working on a little small mechanical thing. When he gets his load in the right way, he's pretty good. He's been okay. He's impacted a few balls. Yesterday was the first day where I didn't feel like his at-bats were great. Otherwise, whether he gets a result or not, the bats are all right. When on earth have we ever heard Boone be so critical of a young player, especially one of their top prospects, let alone say something even remotely critical of one of their worst players? A guy that can't even hit, that can't even stand in the batter's box and do anything with runners in scoring position. This is uncharacteristic for Boone. Now, I don't want to overblow it and make a big thing out of it, but analyzing Boone's trends and the things he's done in the past, this is certainly not something that we're used to, certainly not something that we're used to hearing from him. So I am curious to get your take on exactly what you think he meant by this and why he's being critical of Oswald Peraza right now, when in the past he's never even slightly done anything like this to try and maybe he's trying to push Peraza to be better. I don't really know, but calling a player all right over spring training snaps or stats rather, a lot of people want to push spring training stats aside. Why is this suddenly an impact variable? Why is this suddenly something to discuss?
Yeah, so the way I view it is, it could be, there's one of 2 ways you can view this. Number one, the word all right has a negative connotation to it. I won't sit here and pretend it doesn't. When you're like, oh, that's all right, I guess, that does have, there's a difference between, have been solid and all right, even though in terms of, actual production could probably mean around the same thing. But I do think it might have been from the perspective of his stats, Peraza's stats being, have been bad in spring training, and to go from, hey, he's had, instead of, and to go from, well, he has bad stats to he's been all right, he's been all right, he's working on mechanical things. I guess I'd have to hear the way he was saying it, the context in which it was brought up. But it's definitely, I see both sides of this. One side where people may feel it's kind of like a nothing burger, it's not really anything to take too heavily. But I also think there's a valid argument to say that, that is some sort of indication that he feels like Volpe should have the job, right? He did mention that Peraza is working on mechanical things. Peraza has taken spring training to work on things that, are more related to plate discipline. He's chasing a lot less. He's, swinging and missing on 2 strikes a lot less. His strikeout rate's lower than it was at AAA in spring training. But the way I view things is, Peraza has always kind of been a slow starter. In 2022, he was awful to start the year in AAA. Do I think that that's what's going to happen in 2023? Not necessarily. But I do understand. There's from the fan perspective, from Boone's perspective, from the coaching staff's perspective. Anthony Volpe's put on a show. It hasn't just been good production. It's been putting on a show, putting on a masterclass, doing all the things that the Yankees desperately need for the lineup. And the guy in front of him is not doing those things right now. Now, I still believe Peraza should be the shortstop. I think, you mentioned this earlier where it's like, why is it a Volpe versus Peraza thing? We've always kind of interpreted this as a Volpe and Peraza thing. I still hold that to be true. I will let actions speak louder than words in this situation. But that pound the table meeting that everyone talks about, I really do think this is that Aaron Boone really wants Anthony Volpe to be the shortstop. He absolutely wants Volpe to be the shortstop. But I don't think the front office is going to be very relenting unless they find a trade partner for someone like Torres or even Peraza. But I don't really know what that trade market looks like. Not because Peraza isn't good or anything like that, but because he's very valuable and you have to get something very valuable back. Whereas for Torres, you can kind of trade him for a good outfielder with a couple of years of control, and that's a fair deal. You can't trade Peraza for a good outfielder with a couple of years of control and call it a good deal. It's kind of asset mismanagement. And I also think it's asset mismanagement to keep Peraza in AAA. So, it is just a tough situation all around. I've said this yesterday. I've said this in the past. This is just a situation where the Yankees are going to have to make a decision, and I'm going to have to just kind of make whatever of it because there's no real one argument that makes more sense than the other one. Everything kind of makes sense and doesn't make sense in its own way.
Well, as you've been saying, I'm really happy that we're not the ones making this choice because no matter what they do, someone's going to find something wrong with it. But, promoting Volpe seems like the general consensus good move. I think everyone will be happy with that. I'm really curious to see what happens with Peraza if they do that, because if Peraza starts and Volpe starts, you're guaranteeing that either Donaldson is sitting or you're guaranteeing that Gleyber Torres is sitting. So they have some big choices to make. And now Torres is objectively better than Peraza right now. I would say and he's objectively probably better than Volpe right now, based on the fact that he has, years of experience and years of production at the MLB level. But long term, I think Volpe will be much better than Torres, and Peraza has some offensive liabilities. He does chase, he does fail to hit for contact all the time. This is a player who I think his on-base percentage was like 33%, something in that range at the AAA level. So he's not going to be a massive get on base type of guy. He maybe gets on base at 31% this year, which is not very good. And you're hoping that kind of Volpe will get on base at like a 34%, 35%, which would be excellent for a rookie. And that would be awesome for him. But, at the end of the day, right now, I feel like the Yankees have a big choice to make, and we're going to be monitoring that as the days come by, as, things kind of unfold and new information drop. So we got you guys covered on that end. As always, my friends, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.